All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for choosing to spend your valuable time with us. Today's webinar will cover FIPS 140-3 updates, OE certification, progress, and scheduling, presented by wolfSSL Senior Software Engineer Kaleb Himes. My name is Emma, and I will be moderating the webinar. All attendees will be in listen-only mode. If you have questions, please use the Q&A box, and after the presentation, Kaleb will answer your questions. As always, our webinars are recorded and made available on our YouTube channel. If you'd like to stay updated with the latest from wolfSSL and Code Intelligence, follow us on X, connect with us on LinkedIn, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to contact us via email at facts@wolfssl.com if you have any further questions. Before we dive into the technical presentation, I'd like to provide a brief overview of wolfSSL. Today, wolfSSL secures over 5 billion connections. We have more than 2,500 OEM customers and dozens of resellers. wolfSSL consists of over 50 dedicated employees, primarily engineers. This progress is, of course, supported by a strong partner network that we are very proud of. Since the beginning, our engineering team has developed several embedded security products, including wolfCrypt with DO178 support, a FIPS 140-3 certification, and a FIPS-ready offering, MQTT up to the V5 specification, SSH v2, TPM 2.0, a secure bootloader known as wolfboot, Java wrappers and JSSC support, and commercial support for curl, and our newest product offering, wolfHSM. These offerings are accompanied by thorough maintenance and support plans up to the 24/7 level. We also offer full service consulting. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Kaleb to discuss FIPS 140-3 updates, OE certification progress, and scheduling.
Hi, thanks, Emma. Appreciate it. So yeah, we'll just go ahead and get started here. Hang on. Did I bring up? I am so sorry, everyone. I need to get the right presentation up here. I have the wrong slide deck loaded. Bear with me one moment. I'm going to go ahead and I'll restart sharing in just a second. Off to a rocky start. I do apologize. Okay. All right. Hopefully we can see this okay. Emma, can you confirm it's?
Yep, it looks
good?
great.
Okay. I am so sorry about that, everyone. All right. So today we're going to go over the importance of FIPS, what it is, how we feel our organization helps to set the standard within the industry space that we are involved in as it pertains to FIPS, the strategies that we are offering to help streamline OE validations. The FIPS 140-3 program, kind of like our presentation today, is off to a rocky start. So the CMVP wasn't fully prepared for things. The backlog is huge. The queue times are, under 140-2, it used to take about a year to get a full cert. Now it's taking anywhere from 2 to 3 years to get a 140-3 cert. It's been pretty abysmal, but we have some tools in our tool belt to help you tackle those, or hopefully alleviate some of those times. We'll go over the OE validation backlog we have, just us as a corporation, and then how we're planning those deployments out for the coming year. We'll talk about some key milestones since we received our certificate number 4718, the upcoming FIPS submissions that we have in process today. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with a discussion about CNSA 2.0, the 2030 transition to post-quantum, and what we're planning here at wolfSSL for post-quantum cryptography. So the importance of FIPS is it ensures that there's 100% interoperability between any system in the federal government that is doing cryptography. So if a module that's used by the DoD is doing AES encryption, and then they're sending reports out to the Air Force or the Army or the Navy, those Army, Navy, Air Force systems can receive and decrypt them using a separate AES implementation, as long as both have been through the FIPS certification process. There's a 100% guarantee that those decrypts, encrypts and decrypts are compatible across organizations within the federal government. And then we're also seeing, wide adoption within the industry as a whole, not just the federal space. A lot of other organizations are beginning to adopt the FIPS standards or common criteria standards out of Europe. The FIPS requirements are becoming mandatory basically across the entire federal space. We saw a huge push for that in the last 4 years to make sure that all the federal agencies were abiding by the standard. For many years, it was kind of lackadaisical. Some did, some didn't. Some would have like a soft requirement. Now we're seeing a lot more of those hard requirements come out. Unfortunately, it got timed with the 140-3 transition, and it kind of made for a perfect storm as it started to ramp up. And then, when you have FIPS certification, it does convey a lot of trust to any potential stakeholders or business deals that you would like to close on as an organization. It conveys that added trust to customers you're hoping to close with. It also exposes you to federal contract bids that may or may not otherwise be available to you in your day-to-day work. And then finally, it helps to reduce any risk of breaches due to incorrect cryptographic implementation. Now, whether or not it's consumed correctly or deployed correctly, FIPS can't handle your setup, but it will guarantee that if you're doing everything in the right way, you're not going to be using a vulnerable algorithm that exposes you to data breaches you might otherwise be able to avoid. And then, so yeah, that kind of wraps up that point. I apologize. And then we feel that as an organization, we help to set the standard within the federal space by offering an independent full scope validation for anything or any FIPS product that we're selling. And what that means is when we do FIPS on our own, it takes us, 1 to 3 years to get it done. And we do that all out of pocket using our own budget to cover it. And when a stakeholder approaches us and says, we have a FIPS requirement, we need your FIPS module on this or such and such product, we are not saying, okay, based on past testing that we've done, you can put our module on your product and claim, it's been FIPS certified at some point. What the service that we offer is we say, that's great, you need FIPS. We've done it on Linux, on this CPU and this operating system. What operating system and chip are you running on? If you can send us representative hardware, we'll take it through the full validation with the lab and the CMVP. We'll review it, and they'll add that operational environment to our certificate at the end of the process. So it's not just, there are some shortcuts within the FIPS space that some vendors use. One of them is called vendor affirmation. They will offer to basically say, we actually did certification work on Linux with an Intel Core i7 using this module. Our customer is using it on a similar Linux kernel on a Core Intel Xeon chip, and it's the same module that we certified on the different Linux kernel and Intel Core i7. Therefore, we, the vendor, say it's good to go. That's vendor affirmation. There's no testing involved unless the vendor just decides to do it in-house, but there's no oversight from a FIPS lab, there's no review by the CMVP, and the OE doesn't get added to the actual certificate, it just gets added to the security policy, and the burden of proof is on the vendor to say that things were actually checked or done right, which they may or may not do, but there's no oversight there. So we don't do that. And then there's other, there's rebranding, where you just rebrand a cert, which we do offer. We will add your OE to our certificate with an independent full scope validation, and then rebrand it once the work is done. But some customers will do a rebrand of another entity's module or certificate, and then they'll use, it's one level below vendor affirmation, they'll use what's called user affirmation. And that's just, we, the user that are standing it up, we've checked it, we've tested it to the best of our ability, and we say it's good to go. And that doesn't get added to the security policy or the certificate. That's just the user saying it's good to go. And so there's varying levels of trust associated with each of those approaches. We're offering the highest level of trust as a service. The comprehensive testing that we do with our FIPS lab involves, we run vectors on the target. From the CAVP, we get a set of algorithm certificates showing that and guaranteeing that all the algorithms are operating correctly. And then we do full operational testing with a FIPS lab. And then it gets submitted to the CMVP. CMVP reviews all of our work and the lab's work, and then tells us if we did a good job or not by adding it to the cert, or saying we need to fix some part of the process, and then they will add it to the cert once the issues have been addressed. And there we do have several real world examples where, had we not been doing this process, if we had just been doing, say, vendor affirmation or user affirmation, it could have potentially resulted in a unoperable or a non-operable FIPS module. The first example was in 2015. We discovered a hardware bug on a CPU design. It was causing the AES operations to fail or to compute incorrect results. It could still encrypt and decrypt, but it would not have been interoperable with any other FIPS module in the FIPS space. We reported the bug to the hardware maker, and they were able to get us a new CPU design fresh off the factory floor within a month, and then we finished the certification work once we got the new hardware. Then again in 2022, we updated a tool chain that we had already certified in OE under 140-2, and we were just moving it to our 140-3 work. And we found just from upgrading the compiler that the SHA-256 operations began to fail, and we ended up discovering there was a compiler bug. We did report this bug to the compiler vendor, and we're still waiting for a fix. The bug is still there to this day, even in the latest 19.1.7 version, which I just checked last week to see if it was still there, and it is. But we have been able to find a workaround within our module to remove the symptoms of the bug, but had we not been doing full scope validations, this easily could have been missed. And then finally, we found a linker bug that was squashing RO data and text sections in memory together, causing failures in the integrity check that was being performed on our FIPS module. And we do a very similar check to all the other software modules. So I'm betting, had another software vendor been using this specific linker and not doing full scope validations, this would have gone undetected. and could have resulted in catastrophic failures in the field with deployments. Our entire process is very transparent and traceable. We document everything meticulously, and since 2015, when we started our FIPS work, I've now been through 7 FIPS audits where we sell customer to product A, or sorry, we sell our product to customer A. Customer A then sells it to one of their downstream customers, and then the downstream customer hires a FIPS auditor to review the FIPS that they just purchased, and then that auditor gets a hold of us because all of our contact information is publicly available on the FIPS certificate, and then they'll work with us directly to audit what we did for customer A. And I've been through 7 audits personally. We've never failed one. And in 6 of those cases, our own customers were never even aware that their downstream customer was auditing the purchase. So we deal with it all in the background as part of our support and maintenance agreement that we do with our FIPS customers. And then finally, we have active engagements with multiple FIPS labs, 3 here in the US and 1 up in Canada that we work with. And we have met and talked with staff from the CMVP on several occasions at ICMC, and we have good industry relationships there. And so just being engaged at the level that we are, we've built up a rapport within the FIPS certification body that makes us what we feel is a trusted partner to be working with, and have several labs that will, vouch for the work that we do and the honesty that we try to keep in doing all of our FIPS work. I said at the beginning, certifications are now taking 1 to 3 years, and this has really harmed a lot of people in the federal space trying to wait for their submissions for that long. And so the full scope validation that I was talking about on the last slide, there's a couple of different approaches you can take to avoid the requirement to do a full FIPS submission. And we very commonly tackle 3 of those options, and that's you can do an update submission where you use an existing module that's already been certified. You do some sort of security relevant update to the module. Let's say you're adding a new algorithm that wasn't tested before, or you're adding support for a new processor algorithm acceleration mode that wasn't done on the original work. That's called an update or a UPDT. And, so this option here. And that results in a new certificate with a brand new 5-year runway upon completion. And we haven't completed one of these under 140-3 yet, but under the 140-2 program, these used to take between 6 and 9 months. So where a full validation took a year. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. So it takes about 60 to 70% of the time to complete an update as a full submission. Now it is more involved, and we're guesstimating that under 140-3, this will be close to, a 1 to 2 year estimate, given the full submissions are 1 to 3 years. The next option that we offer is to add an operational environment to an existing certificate with very minimal code changes whatsoever. And by minimal, we mean we can do like maybe some porting work. Let's say you're on an operating system running in a threaded mode, and our library didn't have the exact threading conventions that were necessary to make it work in that operational environment. So we add the new threading capabilities, and it's classified as only porting changes, not security relevant. So we're not changing the cryptography itself. We're just changing some of the peripherals that allow the operating system and the cryptographic module to work together. So that could be done under an OE-UP, which is an OE edition or OE update. And these, under 140-2, these took about 2 months to do. Under 140-3, we don't know yet. We just submitted our first OE-UP in February. And we were adding 25 operational environments to our certificate with that submission. And we're still waiting for the CMVP to approve it at this point. So we don't have a handle on what the timelines are going to look like quite yet, but we're hoping it's around that same 2-month turnaround time as before. And then finally, we do rebrands or white labels. I believe I'd mentioned it earlier already. So once we do or complete an OE-UP onto our certificate, if you need it rebranded into your company's logo and letterhead for marketing purposes, we will be more than happy to do that for you. And these are usually only like it's just a paperwork shuffle. I don't know how long the CMVP will take to approve those now under 140-3. I'm guessing they'll go pretty quick, a week or two, but we haven't done one yet under 140-3, so don't hold me to that. And then, of course, you can combine scenarios now and do combo submissions. So you could do, say, a security relevant change and add operational environments at the same time, or a security relevant change, add an OE, and rebrand all at the same time. And we haven't done any combo submissions yet, but I'm sure those will be forthcoming here soon. And we'll see what kind of timeline that takes. My guess would be it's just going to fall under whatever takes the longest time. That's going to be the combination, will be about the same. And then for full submissions, we had one customer approach us last year. They were looking at the work we had submitted, waiting for our certificate to come out in July. And they said, well, that's great, but we need some other stuff in there. Would you consider doing a full submission just for us? And we said, yeah, sure, let's do it. And so we worked with that customer. We started revamping the module we had already submitted, adding the new features, and we are weeks out from submitting that as we speak today. So I just finished all the code review with the lab, and now we're going into operational testing, and then we just have documentation review and submission after that. So it should be happening here in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. Fingers crossed. And this is kind of, we do want to talk about our current and future plans. So given the high demand for FIPS 140-3, we historically used to submit OE updates one at a time, or if it was for a single customer and they were doing multiples, then we would combine them and maybe submit 3 or 4 at a time. But we'd typically finish a testing round for a customer, we'd submit, wait for it to get approved, and while we were waiting for the approval, we'd start work on the next customers and then submit that. It was just kind of a, step-by-step process, one OE at a time or a small batch of OEs at a time. We had so much demand for OE additions leading into 140-3, however, that we started doing large batches. So I just mentioned we submitted 25 OEs in February. And so this is kind of how the process went. We started our testing in July. As soon as our certificate was issued, we started testing with the lab the next day. We tested from July through October 4th, and the lab was in their quality review about to submit, and the CMVP made some submission requirement changes on October 8th, about 4 days into our quality review checks. And the lab said because of these changes, we were going to have to retest everything. It was something they had to fix on their side, and then they needed us to redo all the testing a second time with these new changes in mind as we were doing the testing. So we started retesting on October 12th, and we completed that testing, second round of it in January, went into quality review around January 28th, and then the lab submitted on February 12th. And so those are currently at the CMVP as we speak, and we're just waiting for those to either be approved or to get some comments back from the CMVP. As soon as those were submitted, we began the next batch, and the next batch is double the size. So we're doing 50 OEs in the next batch. Everything is prepped, and the lab did ask us to hold off until March before they begin testing. And that's just due to personnel shuffle that's happening at the lab, unfortunately. So we're waiting to begin testing for these in March. But we hope to be submitting these by May or June, or as soon as possible. Hopefully we can complete the testing before then if the lab can get us enough test sessions. Otherwise, you know, we're kind of limited by what the lab can give us as far as time goes. Once those are submitted, we'll begin testing on the next batch. And again, we're going to shoot for 50 all at once. We currently have 32 hardware for 32 devices in-house ready to go. So we've got 18 slots that are still remaining. So if you're considering doing an OE edition with us, make sure we get that hardware sooner than later. We've been tackling those on a first come, first served basis. As soon as hardware arrives, it gets inserted into a slot in the queue, and it will go through testing based on arrival date. Of course, that is flexible. We can, you know, if you have some pressing need, just let us know, and we can work out your timeline concerns as far as that goes. These are the milestones we've accomplished since receiving certificate number 4718. Just a quick breakdown of it on this slide. So we did milestone 1, we consider to be complete as soon as the algorithm certificates are issued for a given OE. So we got all the OEs in the first batch, milestone 1 completed. All the OEs in the first batch, milestone 2 was completed on 12 February. That's considered done when it gets submitted to the CMVP, and then milestone 3 is when the CMVP approves it. So we're still waiting on the first batch. We're testing the next batch as we speak, and then we'll be submitting that here soon. And then, of course, you know, the CMVP approval time, we have no estimates for yet, but that's just marked as planned. And then the third batch that we're currently at 32 out of 50 OEs on, everything's in planning at this point. But once everything is all said and done, by the end of this year, we should have 127 different operational environments listed on our certificate. For upcoming full submissions that we're working on, this is the one I mentioned that a customer approached us and said they needed some other stuff, and we're doing a full submission specifically for them. And that was pulling SRTP KDF inside the module boundary, ASXTS, AS cipher feedback mode, AS key wrapping, ED DSA, both 255.19 and 448. And because ED 448 has a dependency on Shake 256, we decided we'd just do both Shake 128 and 256, and then finally the password-based key derivation function. So all those will be on a future certificate, And again, we're hoping to submit that any day now. That one on day one will have 9 operational environments on it when it gets issued. We traditionally, when we're doing these on our own, we just do 1 or 2 OEs. This one will have 9 from the very start. And then we're working with a third party right now who's taking our Wolf Entropy, our software TRNG that uses the jitter principles of a modern CPU, very similar to the jitter entropy library if you're familiar with that. But we wrote ours from the ground up. It's not the jitter entropy library that's available on GitHub. This is our own. Anyways, so yeah, we're working with that third party to get an ESV certificate for our entropy source. And then finally, we're working on a full submission. We just started the initial paperwork and documentation stuff about a month ago now, but we're going to be doing post-quantum, and it'll be LMS, XMSS, the verifies for those, because we're not a level 3 module, so we can't do the key generation stuff, but we can do the verifies. And then we're going to be doing MLChem and MLDSA. Only one of these, I believe it's MLChem, is currently on the approved algorithm list on the NIST website. So we're waiting for the other one to get added, and I might have those backwards. Maybe it's MLDSA that's on the approved list and MLChem is not yet. But as soon as the second one gets added, we'll wait for both to be on the approved list, and that's when we'll submit. So we're going to start testing with the lab. We're going to get everything as far along as we can, and then we'll just kind of sit on it until everything is on the approved list and then submit. And then as far as this goes, we hope to have all testing completed by the end of this year, as far along as we can be. So if anyone is post-quantum conscious and needs an OE to go in with this submission on day one, let us know now, and we can get it added to the plan. And then finally, for this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the 2030 transition that's coming up. So in 2030, the NSA has a hard requirement to remove all traditional algorithms except for AES and SHA, and to support all post-quantum algorithms moving forward. Now that is the NSA, so I don't believe this will affect the entire federal space, but we can expect that once the NSA makes this hard move, a lot of the federal agencies are going to follow. So it's something to be conscious of and planning for today, for sure. This is just a quick overview of the timeline. So by 2030, all software and firmware signing has to be done by post-quantum algorithms. And then all web browsers, operating systems are supposed to be well along the way into a full post-quantum transition. And then custom application and legacy equipment as well. And then the niche equipment, it has a little bit more forgiving of a timeline, but the hard cutoff is 2030. And I apologize, these other ones are supposed to begin transitioning by, it looks like by 2027, web browsers, this year. But yeah, so definitely something to be aware of in planning for the future. Just a little bit about our history of post-quantum. If any are not familiar, so way back in, I think it was 2014, we started supporting ntrue. Oh no, 2010. Sorry, even earlier. ntrue was one of the very first ever lattice-based cryptography libraries that was put out there, and we added support for it very quickly after it became available. But we were way ahead of the game. Nobody was ever really interested in it. We didn't get very many questions about it. It seemed like we were more post-quantum conscious than most of our customer base. But it was fun. It was good exercise, gave us some experience, and fast forward all these years later, it did help set us up for success as the NSA and everyone else begins to make their post-quantum transitions. This is kind of a timeline over the last couple of years of what we've been working on. The most important bullet on this slide is we finally had our own complete implementations of LMS, XMSS, MLChem, and MLDSA in July of last year. Prior to that, we were using third-party post-quantum libraries and just supporting those third-party libraries in our solution while we were working on our own implementations. But now we've got our own, and we are beginning, the FIPS certification work for those as we speak. So the current status and roadmap is as follows. Obviously, we had no post-quantum support, and there was no post-quantum support by NIST. Then we added our own. NIST started to add some testing for it at the CAVP level. One of our staff was invited to the White House to the announcement where NIST finally did announce that, hey, we're making these, formal FIPS standards. So that was kind of cool. And then now we are working on the certification. Sorry, this is a little bit redundant with the last slide. So that kind of wraps up our presentation. If there are any questions, concerns, comments, we would love to hear those at this point. And I will go ahead and turn it back over to Emma.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Kaleb. To start off, just make sure if you have a question, put it in the Q&A box, as you guys are all on mute. Secondly, for Wolf Entropy Library, are there specific hardware platforms it will be designed for, or is it hardware agnostic? And then also, will it be considered as strong as a hardware-based RNG?
So I'll tackle the first part first. Right now, today, it is targeting ARM and Intel CPUs. As we see demand grow in the embedded space, for example, digital signal processors, something of that nature, we will begin to port it to support other architectures as well. But for now, it's just ARM and Intel at the moment. And then the second part of that question, yes, it is a TRNG. It's a true random number generator. In fact, the work we're doing with the third party to get our ESV certificate, it's generating higher quality entropy than Intel's RD-Seed and RD-RAND solution. So RD-Seed and RD-RAND generate, on average, 1 bit of high quality entropy for every 4 bits that it outputs. Right now, our software-based jitter solution is generating 5 bits of high quality entropy for every 8 bits. So it's a slightly higher percentage, just a touch more than 1 for 4, it's 5 for 8.
Wonderful. If an operating environment is already listed on the certificate, does that mean we can use it more easily? Use it more easily?
Yes, you can actually. So if a customer has already done an OE that is a 100% identical match for what you're using today, it does not need to be retested, which means you'll save on the lab fees. And you'll just need a FIPS license to then get access to the FIPS module for it.
Great. What's the difference between FIPS certified, FIPS validated, and FIPS compliant? Is there any difference between these like marketing buzzwords?
Yes, very, very much so. So FIPS compliant, all that means is, there's some FIPS requirements for something to be considered FIPS and ready to go to a lab and to the CMVP. One would be doing an integrity check on itself and the ability to detect if the module had been tampered with in some way. 2 would be doing conditional algorithm self-tests. So each time you use an algorithm, you need to either check, has a self-test for that algorithm been run previously? And if not, go ahead and run that test now. And have the ability to rerun those tests on demand should you desire to, just to check things over time. And so you can be FIPS compliant. You can be doing all those right things and not have gone through a lab and not have been reviewed by the CMVP, and it would be compliant but not certified and definitely not validated. Certified and validated, I would say we hear a lot of people use those interchangeably. I consider them equivalent myself, but that means, to me, certified and validated means a lab has reviewed it, it's been submitted to the CMVP has reviewed it, and a FIPS certificate is issued on the NIST website, and that thing is actually certified or validated.
Wonderful. We have a follow-up question to the Wolf Entropy ones. Would they work for Intel devices, and would it also work for AMD devices?
Yes, it would work on both, absolutely. We're testing it on Intel as we speak, but yes, it will work the same way on AMD, and we're more than happy to test it on AMD.
Wonderful. Can you please restate exactly what an AOOE is?
So an OE is an operational environment. Think of it like the tuple, operating system, chipset, and then module. So if one of those 3 items changes, when the CMVP validates something for the FIPS standard, if it's a software module, they're validating that that software module runs correctly on that operating system and that chip. If the OS or the chip changes, then the CMVP would no longer say that's what they validated. They would say it would need retested for them to then back any claim that that thing had been certified or validated. Now there is some gray area there where the end user that's consuming the product, they do have the option to review, say, an update to the operating system, and they could do a risk assessment and say, well, we know it was certified on this version of the OS. We're on a slightly different version, but that's close enough for us and we're good to go, even though the CMVP will no longer back that claim. So there is some gray area there as far as the end consumer driving the FIPS demand is concerned. But yeah, that's an operational environment. It's the OS, the CPU, and the cryptographic module all combined.
Great. Any plan for CAVP submission of PQC algos like MLDSA this year?
Yes, so if MLDSA and MLChem are both on the approved list by December, we should be submitting by November or December. If for one reason or another, all 4 of the algorithms we're planning on submitting are not all 4 on the approved list by the end of the year, then no, we will hold off until they're all on the approved list, and then we'll submit at that point.
Great. Are there any plans for FIPS 140-3 Level 2 certification?
We actually are working with a customer right now that's wanting us to do a Level 3 certification, which means we would have to complete Level 2 as part of that process. So in a roundabout way, I will say yes, we do have a planned Level 2 submission.
Wonderful. I might butcher this because I'm not super technical, but NIST has not yet released the final 800-131 AR3. What's the official status of the CAVP testing of SHA-1?
SHA-1 will be allowed to be CAVP tested, as far as I'm aware, up until the year 2030. And in fact, most of the way through the year 2030. I believe the announced cutoff date or the end of life date for CAVP testing for SHA-1 is September of 2031 and maybe December of 2031. No, sorry, 2030, September or December of 2030.
Wonderful. Does CNSA 2.0 specify the certificate PQC signing transition timeline?
Um, I believe that's part of the, yeah. Hang on, let me see if I can go back to that slide. Software, I believe it would, yeah, that's a good point. So they're asking about certificate signing. All that's listed is software and firmware signing. I would assume it would fall under this, but I have to be honest, given you said certificate signing, I'm not 100% certain. And I do apologize.
That is okay. For a financial institution, would you recommend a key management system for digital assets be FIPS certified / validated, or is just compliant okay?
It would
And
really come down to, so what drives FIPS demand is normally there's a federal organization that needs a service or wants to use an existing service. And they will say, in order to use this product or service, it has to be FIPS compliant or it has to be FIPS certified. And depending on what their requirements are, they're ultimately the only ones that can determine that. So I don't know, is honestly the answer. You know, if you're a financial institution and you want to go for full FIPS validation, it certainly can't hurt, but will it be required and would compliant be okay? The answer may be yes.
great, thank you. Are there any plans for Risk 5?
Yes. So we actually have RISC-V assembly optimizations already. We're taking advantage of hardware acceleration on the RISC-V chips. And we are just waiting for the right customer to come along to say, hey, I need it FIPS certified, and we will do it. Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. wolfSSL offers hardware accelerated versions. Are there any effects and or differences to the OE cert processes?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. The answer is yes. So every time we take something through the lab for testing, we get charged a set of lab fees, which we then pass on to our customers. And when we do acceleration, because we claim that we are a software module, there's a CMVP requirement that says if you're a software module and you're doing acceleration, you have to test with that acceleration, and then you also have to test without that acceleration to prove that you're not dependent upon that acceleration in order to remain a software module. So then we have to test it 2 different times with our labs, so it's 2 sets of lab fees that we end up passing on to our customers. But if we can, you know, there's bulk discount opportunities if you're doing multiple OEs, stuff like that. So just mention it, you know, as you're talking to any of our business directors that you're looking at doing acceleration, you're aware you're going to have to do testing 2 times with the lab, and ask them if there's a bulk discount opportunity to tackle that.
Great. Are there any Zephyr interests coming into OEs?
I have not heard of any myself.
Wonderful. If a customer requires a FIPS compliant encryption and hash algorithms, can you simply use existing algorithms specified in NIST documentation, or do you actually need to go through certification through someone like wolfSSL? It's a little confusing what actually requires certification.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So what I'll say is we work with, you know, entities all over the world, and a lot of times we have customers out of the United Kingdom that are doing smart metering, and they're doing common criteria certification work. But the common criteria certification says you have to have algorithm certificates from the FIPS program in order to move forward with common criteria work. And so what we'll do in that case is we'll just test our algorithms on that product, and it may not even be the FIPS module. We're just testing our commercial algorithms, the non-FIPS versions of them, and we're taking them through the algorithm cert process, that milestone 1 that I had on the one slide. I can scroll back up here. So it would just be doing this first milestone, algorithm certificates, and that's good enough. That's all they need. And then they're off to common criteria and to do their common criteria stuff. Let me reread this question real quick. If a customer requires a FIPS compliant encryption, so that would be compliant because you've proven the algorithm runs correctly. It is FIPS compliant, and hash algorithms. Can you simply use existing algorithms specified in this documentation? Yes. Or do you actually need to go through certification through someone like wolfSSL? No, you would not have to go through us. You could reach out to a lab on your own if you wanted to. You could just use a commercial version of our library or someone else's library. And as long as you had the ability to write the tools necessary to process the vectors from the CAVP, and you had the technical know-how to get that done, you could absolutely do it on your own. You wouldn't have to go through us. I guess our value add to that scenario is we've already gone through the work to write our own tools. We have the technical know-how. We have contacts within the industry. We just make it a much easier process for you, but of course, at a cost.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Caleb, for hosting an informative webinar, and thank you to everyone for joining. I will email a copy of the webinar recording and PDF slides this afternoon. You can keep up with our upcoming events, meet our team in person, read our blog posts, and get the latest wolfSSL and code intelligence updates by following us on X, connecting with us on LinkedIn, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. If you have any questions now, please reach out to us at facts@wolfssl.com. And thank you again. We look forward to seeing you on March 20th for Wolf HSM Design for Automotive Hardware Security Modules. Thank you all.